Welcome back to the back porch. I'm that neighbor across the tracks that Mr. Rogers never went to visit. But we have good stories too. Today we got a story about a hammer, gardening, a skull, and Lynette Fromme. All here on the back porch. Okay, the other day in a video about Blue, and if you watched it, thanks, I appreciate it. If you didn't, go watch it now. I said, and I don't have a script for none of this stuff, I just speak, I just talk. Like my dad used to tell me, you just talk out your, forget it. I said that Sandra Good was in Terminal Island, which she was. And she had some crazy visitors there too. The FBI was watching them too. She had some crazy visitors. Anyway, back to Lynette. I said that Sandy was waiting there and they were eventually going to hook up in Andersonville, which is sort of the truth. I got the first part right. And both of them are prisons. Andersonville's a prison where they had Civil War. People from the Civil War go, and that was a terrible place. I mean, that was a brutally terrible place. Alderson, West Virginia, was a federal prison for women. That is a cupcake prison. And it's not even a cupcake prison compared to Andersonville. It's just a cupcake prison altogether, because this is where Martha Stewart ended up later on in her life too, after she got in trouble for the things she got. And then they even called it a cupcake prison when she was there. But, okay, now that we got that all cleared up, Blue's in Terminal Island, and where is Lynette Fromme? Well, if you look at, like I said, you look at Wikipedia, it'll tell you that she was already in Alderson, but she wasn't. She wasn't there yet. Blue would eventually hook up with her, and they both hooked up in a federal prison here in California. And that's where the hammer comes into play. This is where I started looking at the story a lot differently too. Because the last time we were looking at the book, I also forgot to mention about Susan Murphy. She also was in Terminal Island at the same time with Blue. So they both got sent to Terminal Island. And Lynette was somewhere else. And I'll show you that in a minute. But Susan Murphy was only there for a very short time, and she escaped. Blue is in Terminal Island after she gets arrested for mail fraud. And Lynette Fromme is in a place where she's working in a garden and she has a hammer. We're getting to that. So, Terminal Island is where Blue is. She's with the accomplice, Susan Murphy, who takes off and escapes. Lynette is in another prison in Dublin, California. Another cupcake prison. Because they give you hammers there. I should have turned the page the other day in the book, because then it would have shown that Lynette was in prison in a place called Dublin, and there was her address when she wrote a letter from there. And she wrote a letter there from Charlie. So her and Charlie were talking right immediately through the mail. So yes, eventually somebody's dream would come true. I don't know whose it is. Red and Blue were reunited back in prison again. Well, not again, it was the first time. And look at all these preppy girls that are around. These girls look out of place compared to these girls. Another cupcake prison. You want to know some of the people who were in this prison? Oh yeah, this is where Lynette got to work in the garden at. And she got to use a hammer. We're getting there. We're getting there. There's a hammer involved in Lynette, in her hand, and somebody's skull. Yeah, we're getting there. Patty Hearst. Michael Milken. I don't know, he's some billionaire that did something. All these people they get put in these cupcake prisons, just like our friend Lynette did, until she decided to take a terrorist and smack her over the head with a hammer. Maybe because she was pro-Croatian. Maybe because she was just rich. We'll just look at that later. College scandal where they got in for paying. You know how that works. Then they get a cushy prison and a cushy sentence. They only did a few weeks, a few months, whatever. That was Felicity Huffman. And then we had Heidi Fleiss, remember her? Stacey Kuhn, he's the guy that, they even put guys in this prison too. Again, it's a cushy place. So Lynette had it going on pretty easy. She was another one in them college scandals, Lori Loughlin. I think she only did like 2 weeks there or something. Then we had our friend Lynette. She was going on there. And they never mention over here, they never mention Sandra Good. She was never important enough. But Lynette, she attacked a pro-Croatian hijacker of a TWA airplane and smacked her in the head with a hammer while she was in this prison. We get to the hammer. In this prison, Lynette, and there's the address right there that we showed from the book, was writing to Charles Manson, and it was paid for by the Department of Justice. They paid for the postage even. I think Lynette came out of Lynette's, but who knows, man? Might be free. Who knows? She was writing to Charles Manson at that point in this prison, so why would she jeopardize any of that by going and smacking some girl in the head with a hammer? I almost forgot to show you the letter that was inside the envelope. Let's read that. And it's kind of in code. It doesn't have his name on it, so obviously she's getting this mail through to him. Obviously. Didn't get intercepted anywhere, and I have it like 50 years later, so it got through. She calls him Atwa. Atwa. I can see the old man you're talking about trudging up the hill with the glass and the papers. He was alone, and the little things he and you know I have only begun to see or remember as something I knew as I hurried by. In the same way, for me to write something to you, I'd have to know myself in the moments of each day to raise with stronger, to get what I want beyond the diversions of food and the images of other thoughts. I'll mail this so that you know I got yours. R. Well, if I was judging by that letter from Lynette to Charlie from Dublin, where both Lynette and Sandra Good are both at right now, she doesn't sound happy. She sounds depressed. She's able to write Manson. Doesn't sound like she even knows what to say in the letters. Oh, we'll get to more letters, because when she knocks that girl over the head, and we're getting to that too, she gets shipped out of that place. Now she's away from Sandy, and she writes better letters then. But she sounds kind of depressed. And I'm on to something there, I think. Susan Murphy went to Terminal Island, and they were both buddy-buddy. All of a sudden, Susan Murphy's like, see ya. Now, Blues, I guess it's Blue's dream to be with Lynette, because in the card that we read from Terminal Island, it's the only friends that she ever had, Lynette and Charlie. And I don't know how that's the case. We'll get to that later too. That just sounds like a bunch of garbage too. But if they're all together, they're all happy, they're right, and they're in a cupcake prison, why in the world does Lynette sound depressed? And then clank this chick over the head with the hammer. Okay, it's long enough. We're going to read that article about why she clanked the chick over the head with a hammer. The victim was Julian Schultz Busick, one of 5 Croatian nationalists who hijacked a jet airliner with 93 people aboard in 1976 over Buffalo, New York. Ms. Busick was convicted of air piracy and contributing to the death of a police officer killed by a bomb left at a subway locker. She is a native of Eugene, Oregon, and is a graduate of Portland State University. Witnesses said they did not know the motive for the attack at the Pleasanton Correctional Facility but that Miss Fromme hit Miss Busick Thursday with the claw end of the hammer while shouting that she was a white middle-class rich bitch and didn't deserve to live. Miss Busick suffered a pretty good blow, but was reported to be in good condition. March 14th, 1979. I was talking to Charlie one time in person, and had many conversations in person, but one of the particular conversations I had in person with him, he was talking about how he wished that when he came to that crossroads, that place where he met Lynette Fromme, he should have just asked her if she would marry him for the third time, because the third time would have probably been a charm. And he could have just went down the road and none of them would have ever had any troubles, and he would have probably lived happily ever after. And he said he would have probably been just like me, sitting on the other side of the table. And when I read some of her letters, I think about that conversation and I think, damn, she thinks kind of the same thing, I think. Which is pretty sad that when they came to that crossroads, that they should have took the other way. I don't know. Let's read the letters and see what you say. Because now she's to the next prison and Blue's not there anymore. She seems a little happier. No. I'd be happier if Blue wasn't looking over my shoulder too. And Susan Murphy, the same thing. She's like, out of here. But anyway, let's look at these. So here's the letter from Lynette in San Diego. Another prison that they never mentioned that she was in, because we know more than Wikipedia. That's why you should come back to the backboard tapes and watch us here. She's writing Charles Manson again, and let's get into this letter. Okay, now Lynn's in San Diego at a different federal prison. There's no Blue around. She doesn't clank somebody with this part of the hammer in the head. Can you imagine getting hit in the head with that part of the hammer? And now she's in San Diego and she's writing Manson another letter. And let's get into this letter and see how it goes. If it seems to pick up from the depression of the last letter that she had, because it does tend to have a happier feel to it, maybe. If I'm lying, I don't even know it. And I look at myself to check. Pat's him is you. How could she have any other reason but my actions off the corner, making her and Lou wonder how I even got in your love? Bruce always wanted a set pattern of words so he wouldn't have to figure anything out. Sue needed a congregation. I used to rather doubt myself than think all was not right with the family. B, meaning Sandra Good. B is realistic and straightened me out on that. Just thoughts anyway. We're writing all now because without them there's no you. Without you there's no reason. And they can't deny the truth unless they're denying themselves. We didn't realize there was no concern. I'm down so far. I don't feel much this way or that. Balance. And since I'm responsible, I sometimes think to show what happens to someone who disgraces. Wow. If that would bring it together and real. I can be quiet if it will keep you alive and out of your BS. It's my illusion of you that I hang on to. I see I've used you as an excuse to do. So there you have it. Now you know a little bit more about the story of what happens when you let Lynette Fromme in the garden with a hammer. It also tells a little bit of piece about where these people were and what they were doing. Because that's what I like doing here down in the back porch tapes garage. It's just a hobby, you know. I am not telling on these people. They didn't give me these letters. They eventually sold them out. Like I said, they were trying to do a book, and their letters would probably be better than the book anyway, because they're really getting to the truth of the whole matter of how they're feeling and, you know, exactly what they're saying to each other. And in here we see a couple letters where what Lynette was thinking at the time while she was writing to Charles Manson. And it also makes me wonder, was Lynette, was she one of these precursors to, of a person who pulls out a gun with the intention of law enforcement handling it? You know what I mean? Was that her intention? And afterwards, then you got to live with the consequences. That wasn't what happened. They just grabbed it off of you because it wasn't loaded anyway. Because your intention wasn't that. So that's why they always tell you, you better have good intentions of whatever you're doing. And then she ended up in the whole system where maybe she didn't even plan on that to happen. I don't know, man. This all sounds strange to me. There was no reason for her to go there and do that, except for one reason. Until next time, or until maybe Lynette lets us in on them feelings from her own, you know, it doesn't matter. This is the back porch tapes. These are stories from there, just like stories from everywhere else, like Current Affair or anywhere else. These are for us. Peace.